So if you have a lot of algae in your tank, people are always looking for what's a fish I can use to take care of this problem, or what's a simple solution. In general, the best thing for algae is going to be Hello and welcome to the Tye-Dyed Iguana channel. My name is Collin, and in today's video we're going to be discussing algae and its role in the aquarium. We're going to talk about solutions to control algae and more specifically ways to prevent it. So tune in today and find out more. Alright, so let's specifically talk about what algae are. So algae are a unique organism that's found in aquatic and non-aquatic environments. They are photosynthetic organisms that can be single cellular, and they can also be multicellular, but most commonly in the home aquarium we're going to be focusing on the types that are single cellular. So let's talk about sources of nutrition for algae in the home aquarium, or rather, what do algae consume? So algae, we know they're primarily photosynthetic, so that means they absorb energy from the sun or energy from light. So the first source of energy for algae is going to be light. So the lighting in your tank, that's generally going to be a big contributing factor, as well as sunlight. So one of the main tips I have for folks when they set up a home aquarium, you want to make sure it's out of direct sunlight. Not that it's harmful necessarily to the tank, but direct sunlight is super efficient at growing algae in the aquarium. Another food source for algae can be things called phosphates and silicates. So what are those? So phosphates, of course, it's basically a dissolved form of phosphorus in your water. So this is commonly found in tap water and all kinds of source water. Another thing that can contain phosphates would be a lot of aquarium foods. For example, frozen aquarium foods tend to contain higher levels of phosphates. As well, as far as silicates, we can think of those basically as dissolved minerals in your water. So for a lot of folks, if you're using municipal water or well water, it's going to come in naturally with a very high level of what we call dissolved silicates. So phosphates and silicates, that's going to be the second source of nutrition or fuel for algae. Third thing as far as fuel source for algae is going to be nitrates. So nitrates, we know in the home aquarium, you can think of that as the total level of dissolved waste in your tank. So that's kind of a general explanation, but nitrates, I like to think of it as basically the fish poop number, or the amount of dissolved ammoniacal waste product in your tank. So let's talk about, first off, if we have algae, we can rule out several things. So the first tip, if you have a lot of algae in your tank, my first thing would be, let's check your photo period, meaning let's check how long your light's on per day. Here at the Tye-Dyed Iguana, we generally recommend having your lights on a photo period in a home aquarium of about 8 hours per day. Keeping the lights 8 hours or less is generally going to prevent any algae issues as far as having the lights on too long. We have a lot of folks, they say, oh my gosh, I run my lights 24 hours a day. Well, that's going to be a big contributing factor, especially if you have a big algae problem in your tank. My next fix for an algae issue, I often ask customers, how often are you feeding? So a lot of folks, if you're feeding 2 and feeding 3 times a day, you're having a lot of consumed, undissolved waste product in your tank. That, of course, is breaking down into ammonia, which turns to nitrite, and then to nitrates. It's also secondarily leaching probably phosphates into your tank as well. So heavy overfeeding is another contributing factor to an algae problem in our tank. Third thing we often commonly see is our source water. So most of us, we use municipal tap water and we use conditioners like Prime. While these products are going to remove chlorine, chloramine, and most of the heavy metals out of our tank, they're not going to take care of those phosphates and silicates. So the third thing I would recommend is check your source water if you're having a problem with algae. In many instances, if you're having a high TDS, or AKA a high level of dissolved solids in your water, this can be a major contributing factor. So there's several ways you can test this. Of course, you can use something called a TDS meter. It's going to give you a hard number as far as the amount of dissolved solids in your water. You can also test something called your GH, or your general hardness. It's going to tell you the amount of calcium and magnesium ions that are in your water. We can do that testing for you here at the store if you need. If you have a really high level of dissolved solids in your water, that can definitely be another contributing factor in your tanks. So one more thing when we're talking about our source water, very important, I always really recommend as a good form of prevention, regular water changes. So we know that regular water changes, of course, they're going to prevent that accumulation of nitrates, which is going to be a source for our algae problem, but as well, they're going to help to keep our dissolved solids low. A lot of customers I have do use tap water, which of course is going to help to keep those levels low. But we have a lot of folks as well that use reverse osmosis water, are also known as RO water. So this water usually has a TDS, or a total level of dissolved solids. A good RO water should be less than 30 parts per million, which is really low. Just to give you an idea, Most of our tap water in this area comes out with a TDS of between 200 and 300 parts per million. So using RO water can be an effective way to lower those level of dissolved solids in your tank. Usually also it'll have zero nitrates, zero everything else as well. So using RO water can be beneficial, but I do want to remind you, if you do use RO water, you're going to also need to use a remineralization product like our Replenish from Seachem to treat that water. So remember as well, keeping those lights low, keeping up with our regular water changes, we're going to keep our nutrient load low in the tank. It's going to be very beneficial at preventing any nasty algae in our system. So first thing is check those things. And that's going to help us to pinpoint specifically which issue we are facing. So let's talk a little bit about treatment for algae at home. So if you have a lot of algae in your tank, people are always looking for what's a fish I can use to take care of this problem, or what's a simple solution. In general, the best thing for algae is going to be a multi-pronged attack. So it's not going to be a simple one solution thing. So for example, as far as algae buildup on your glass, you can use snails and things like that to some degree, but in effect, the most efficient, direct manner of removing that, we're going to mechanically remove it. So a product like our algae scraper from Seachem, these have both a pad for acrylic and a blade for glass. It's going to help you to really remove all that hard algae that is built up on the glass and the surfaces of the tank. However, obviously on plants and decorations and things like that, that can be a little bit more tricky. So as far as great things for removing algae, it's going to depend on the type of algae. So there's many different types of algae in the home aquarium. One of the more common types of algae we see would be like hair algae or what's called blackbeard algae. These are generally best removed by different fish. So for example, the Siamese algae eater, the Florida flagfish, and mollies, these can be a great fish to add for removing those larger algae from your tank. As well as the hard algae that grow on surfaces and on plants, some great options would be also rabbit snails, nearite snails, autosynclus cats. Those would be an excellent option for removing and consuming some of those algae naturally if you're wanting to go the fish route. Let's talk a little bit about chemical treatments we can use on our water. So in general here at the Tye-Dyed Iguana, we try to maintain a natural approach. I myself am not a huge fan of algicides. Although these products are on the market, they do generally contain some harmful chemicals. And keep in mind, once you kill that algae basically in your tank, it's therefore polluting the water from that dead organism in the tank. So algicides I tend to stay away from, or tend to at least be on the cautious side for. Now, if you are looking for a chemical treatment that's going to help with algae, I'm going to show you a couple products that I think can make a big difference. All right, so as far as liquids we can add to our tank to help with algae, one product I'm a big proponent for would be our Flourish Excel from Seachem. So what is this product? So it's actually not an algicide, meaning it doesn't actually kill the algae, but what this product does is, it's basically a form of liquid carbon dioxide dosing for the tank. So what this is going to do is, it's going to have a secondary inhibitory effect on the growth of algae in our tank, meaning it's going to make it harder for the algae to grow and basically proliferate in the tank. So once we've got things under control, Excel can be a great product to add for our tank as far as preventing future algae. The secondary benefit of this as well is that Excel is also going to provide a bioavailable source of carbon for our live plants, which will also help in preventing algae. So if you have a nice planted tank, those plants are going to also help to remove those phosphates, nitrates, and silicates as well to a lesser degree. So having lots of plants in the tank can also have an inhibitory effect on the algae. But Excel would be a great addition if you're looking to prevent algae in a liquid dosing form. So another great product as far as removing and controlling phosphates and silicates in our water would be our Phospiltrum. So this is a product that's made by Aquavitro over at our friends at Seachem. So this is actually a granular chemical filtration media that's actually capable of absorbing phosphates and silicates out of our tap water. So this is a ferric oxide, basically a specialized type of iron oxide that specifically absorbs those phosphates and silicates out of our water. One tip for these types of filter media is, just like your carbon and your other filter medias, they basically have a limited efficacy, meaning once they fully absorbed all that they can't do any more work. It's not like Purigen or Pure Filtrum where they can be recharged. Once these are fully absorbed, they are depleted. So they do need to be replaced. Once your problem is under control, you definitely want to make sure you remove it from the tank. Generally, for most folks, I recommend changing these out of approximately every 2 to 4 weeks. But keep in mind, you do need to remove it. Otherwise, if you leave it in the tank, it's going to continue to leach those phosphates and silicates back into your water. So for chemical filtration media in a hang-on back filter or canister style filter, Phospiltrum would absolutely be an excellent addition to controlling that algae. If you have any questions about algae control or prevention, be sure to drop in store, send us a message online, or bring in a water sample. We can check your tank out and go from there and give you a recommendation. Thanks guys, and have a great day.